Mom, you don't need to come this summer. Sarah's voice floated through the phone speaker. Greg thinks it's better if we keep the lake house just for our family this year. I paused my hand mid-wipe across the kitchen counter. The dishcloth dripped a single drop of soapy water onto the linoleum. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't gasp. I simply stared at the calendar pinned to my fridge. Just for your family, I repeated my tone entirely flat. Right. Sarah rushed her words, clearly hoping to bypass any argument. Greg's parents are flying in and his siblings want to bring their kids. It's going to be packed. You wouldn't be comfortable anyway with all the noise. We're hosting a huge barbecue on the 24th of June. It just makes more sense. Makes more sense. Those words hung in the air. I see, I replied. You're not mad, right? We just need the space. I understand completely, I answered. I tapped the red button on the screen, cutting the line before she could offer another hollow excuse. I didn't cry. At 68, I had shed enough tears over my late husband's passing to waste any on a disrespectful daughter. I walked over to the wooden desk in my living room, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out a thick blue folder. Inside sat the property deed. It bore only one name, Francine Hayes. I built that house 5 years ago using my savings and my late husband's life insurance. I picked the tiles, I hired the contractors, and I paid every single property tax bill. It was my sanctuary. Yet my daughter and her husband had just uninvited me from my own property. I looked back at the calendar. June 24th. Greg's massive family reunion. I tapped my fingers against the hard wood of the desk. If they wanted a private summer vacation without me, I would absolutely guarantee they got one. Just not at my lake house. The signs had been there for months. I simply chose to brush them off, to keep the peace. I drove up to the lake house the following Tuesday, knowing Sarah and Greg were stuck at their corporate jobs in the city. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, the familiar sound usually bringing a wave of calm. Today, it just sounded like a countdown. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the disrespect stared right back at me. My favorite floral armchair, the one I bought specifically to read by the stone fireplace, was gone. In its place stood a bulky, black leather recliner that screamed, Greg's taste. I walked into the kitchen. The vintage coffee mugs my husband and I had collected over decades were boxed up and shoved above the fridge. Greg's protein powder tubs now dominated the prime counter space. I moved down the hallway toward the master bedroom. My bedroom. The door was shut. I turned the knob and pushed it open. My floral quilt had been replaced by a stark gray duvet. On the nightstand, framed photos of Greg's family sat exactly where pictures of my late husband used to be. They had completely taken over the space, assuming my silence meant surrender. I didn't scream. I didn't call Sarah to demand an explanation. Arguing with entitled people only gives them a stage to perform their victimhood. I preferred results over reactions. I walked straight to the hall closet, grabbed a stack of heavy-duty garbage bags, and began packing. I didn't touch their things. I only packed mine. The vintage mugs, my husband's framed photos, the watercolor paintings I had carefully chosen. As I carried the third box to the trunk of my car, a quiet realization settled over me. They didn't view me as a mother or a homeowner. They viewed me as a free property manager who occasionally got in their way. I slammed the trunk shut. The house felt hollow now, stripped of my memories. That was fine. It made the next step much easier. My son David sat on my living room sofa watching me organize a stack of real estate documents on the coffee table. Unlike Sarah, David had never treated my assets as his personal inheritance. She actually said, "You shouldn't come to your own house." David shook his head, a deep frown settling on his face. Her exact words were that Greg thinks it's better I corrected sliding a property survey across the table. And they are hosting a massive party on June 24th for Greg's extended family. David scoffed. Greg has had his eye on that place since the day the drywall went up. Do you want me to call Sarah? I'll tell her to pack her things and mail you the keys. No, I stopped him immediately. If you call her, it turns into a family drama. Greg will spin it to make me look like an unreasonable old woman ruining their summer. I don't do drama, David. I do business. I handed him a folder. He opened it, his eyes scanning the top page. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. You're listing it. I'm not just listing it, I replied, sipping my black tea. I called a private broker this morning. I told her I want an off-market sale. No for sale signs in the yard. No Zillow listings for Sarah to stumble upon. Just quiet, verified, cash buyers looking for a turnkey summer home. Mom, this is brilliant, David chuckled, leaning back. But you have a lot of heavy furniture left up there. You can't move that alone. That's exactly why I invited you over for coffee. I smiled. I rented a moving truck for tomorrow morning. We are going to clear out the master bedroom suite, my porch swing, and the dining table your father built. Leave the cheap guest beds for the buyers. And what happens on June 24th? David asked, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. On June 24th, I answered smoothly. Greg will learn a very valuable lesson about property rights. David and I arrived at the lake house just after sunrise on Wednesday. The morning mist still clung to the water, painting a serene picture that completely contrasted with my mission. I walked up the wooden porch steps, pulled my key from my purse, and slid it into the front door lock. It stopped halfway. I frowned, wiggling it. It wouldn't turn. Everything okay? David asked, carrying an empty moving box up the steps. The key won't turn. I pulled it out and examined it, then looked at the deadbolt. The metal casing around the lock was shiny and brand new. There were no scratches on it like the old one. They had changed the locks. A cold wave of clarity washed over me. This wasn't just Sarah being inconsiderate. This was Greg systematically locking me out of my own investment. He truly believed possession was 9/10 of the law. David noticed the new metal too. His face darkened. Mom, this is crossing a massive line. I'm breaking a window. You will do no such thing, I instructed calmly. Walk around to the back patio. Remember the sliding glass door. The secondary lock mechanism is a metal rod I installed myself. I never gave them the code to the outdoor lockbox where I keep the spare patio key. We walked around the back. The lockbox was still secured to the gas meter. I punched in the 4-digit code, retrieved the key, and opened the sliding door. Inside, we worked quickly and quietly. We dismantled the heavy oak dining table. We loaded up the antique porch swing. Every piece of furniture that carried my history went into the back of the rental truck. We left their cheap particle board desks and Greg's massive recliner exactly where they were. By noon, the house was perfectly staged for a sale completely wiped of my existence. As David locked the patio door behind us, I looked at the house one last time. I felt absolutely nothing. No regret, no sorrow. Only the sharp, clean feeling of taking my life back. My real estate broker, Nancy, was a woman who understood efficiency. I sat across from her at my kitchen table 2 days later. I showed the property to a couple from out of state yesterday. Nancy slid a single sheet of paper toward me. They are retiring early and want a lakefront property immediately. They love the fact that the guest rooms are already furnished. I picked up the paper. It was a clean, all-cash offer. The number was actually higher than I had anticipated. There is one condition. Nancy tapped her pen against her notebook. They want a fast closing. They intend to spend the entire summer there. They requested a closing date of June 20th. I looked at the date on the paper. June 20th. Exactly 4 days before Greg's massive family reunion. 4 days before Sarah planned to host her in-laws on my dime. I picked up a pen from the table. "Are there any contingencies?" I asked, holding the pen above the signature line. "None," Nancy smiled confidently. "They waived the inspection since the house is only 5 years old. Once you sign this, we open escrow. The funds will be wired directly to your account next Thursday. Tell them we have a deal." I signed my name in smooth, bold strokes. Francine Hayes. As Nancy packed her briefcase, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey, Mom. Greg's parents are asking if you have a larger grill at the main house we could borrow for the 24th. The one at the lake is too small for all the meat Greg bought." I stared at the screen. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. I didn't type out a long, angry paragraph. I didn't mention the locks. I simply typed, "I don't have a grill for you. Have a good summer." I hit send, muted her notifications, and poured myself another cup of tea. The wheels were in motion, and nothing could stop them now. The 20th of June arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. I dressed in a comfortable linen suit and drove to the escrow office downtown. The buyers, a pleasant older couple named Arthur and Helen, sat across the large mahogany conference table. They were excited, chatting about their plans to buy a pontoon boat and spend their evenings watching the sunset. "It's a beautiful property," Francine Helen beamed, sliding a stack of documents toward the escrow officer. "We really appreciate you moving so quickly on this." "I'm glad it's going to people who will appreciate the space," I replied warmly. I signed the final deed transfer. I slid the single patio key across the table. "Just a heads up," I mentioned casually. "The front door locks were recently replaced by a family member who lost a key. You'll probably want a locksmith to come out and rekey the whole house anyway." Standard procedure. "Oh, absolutely. We have a guy coming tomorrow morning?" Arthur nodded. The escrow officer stamped the final page. "All right, folks. We are fully closed. Francine, your wire transfer has already been initiated. It should reflect in your account within the hour." I walked out of that building feeling 10 pounds lighter. I sat in my car, opened my banking app on my phone, and watched the screen refresh. A very large, very comfortable number appeared in my checking account. My financial security was locked down. My boundaries were drawn in permanent ink. I drove straight to a local travel agency. For years, I had put off my dream of touring the Mediterranean because I was too busy managing the lake house and accommodating my daughter's schedule. I walked through the agency doors, sat at the front desk, and handed the agent my passport. "I need a first-class ticket to Italy." I smiled. Leaving on the 25th. The next 3 days were wonderfully ordinary. I spent time in my garden pruning my roses and packing my suitcases for Rome. David came over on Friday evening for dinner. We sat on my back patio eating grilled salmon and drinking a crisp white wine. "Sarah texted me twice today," David noted, swirling the wine in his glass. "She complained that you're being distant. She also complained that some of the furniture was missing from the lake house when Greg went up there to drop off some coolers yesterday." I sliced a piece of salmon. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you took your antiques home to clean them." David grinned. "Which is technically true." "Did Greg notice the new locks?" Arthur and Helen were scheduled to rekey the house on Wednesday. Greg must have used the side door or thought the lock was just sticking, I guessed. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to notice as long as he could drop off his beer coolers. David laughed softly. "Tomorrow is the 24th. "Yes, it is." I took a slow sip of my wine. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't pacing the floors. I had spent my entire adult life providing for my family, ensuring everyone was comfortable. The moment Sarah allowed her husband to change the locks on my property, she ceased being my responsibility and became an adult dealing with the consequences of her own arrogance. "Do you think she'll drive up there early?" David asked. "Greg wants to impress his family," I answered. They will arrive at noon, right when the sun is best expecting a fully furnished free vacation home. I looked at my watch. It was 8 p.m. In 16 hours, reality was going to hit them like a freight train. More wine, I asked my son. Absolutely, he smiled. Saturday, June 24th. I was sitting in my living room checking my flight details on my iPad. My bags were packed and waiting by the door. At exactly 1:15 p.m., my cell phone began to vibrate violently on the coffee table. Sarah's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Then a third time. I finally picked it up, pressing the speaker button. "Hello?" I answered casually. "Mom, where are you?" Sarah's voice was completely frantic, bordering on hysterical. In the background, I could hear a dog barking and several people talking loudly. "I'm in my living room, Sarah. I fly to Italy tomorrow." Italy. "Mom, what is going on?" she yelled. Greg and I just pulled up to the lake house with his parents. There are cars in the driveway. The locks are changed again, and there are old people inside unpacking groceries. I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. That would be Arthur and Helen. Who are Arthur and Helen? They are the new owners, I stated simply. Complete silence fell over the line. Even the background noise seemed to drop. "What do you mean, new owners?" Sarah whispered, the panic in her voice shifting into raw shock. "I mean, I sold the house, Sarah." "We closed on Tuesday." "You sold it!" Her voice cracked, echoing through the phone. "Without telling us, my husband's entire family is standing in the driveway. Greg's father is trying to talk to the man right now." "How could you do this?" "I did exactly what you asked," I replied evenly, leaning back against my sofa cushions. "I never asked you to sell it." "No, you didn't. I agreed. You just told me I wasn't welcome. So I removed myself, and I took my property with me." "Mom, you have to fix this." "Sarah," demanded her voice shaking, "tell them there was a mistake. We have 20 people out here expecting a barbecue. There is no mistake. Sarah, the deed is in their name." Suddenly, the phone fumbled and a deep, furious voice took over. Francine Gregg barked. "What kind of sick game is this? You sold our house." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I sold my house. Greg. The one I bought with my money. The one you changed the locks on without my permission. "We changed the locks for security," he snapped, stumbling over his excuse. "You don't even use the place. We maintain it. You redecorated it and used it as a free hotel," I corrected sharply, cutting through his noise. "You treated me like a trespasser on my own land. You wanted a summer home for your family. Now you'll have to go buy one. Please apologize to Arthur and Helen for trespassing on their driveway and leave before they call the local authorities." "You are ruining our family," Greg shouted. "No, Greg," I answered calmly. "I am just no longer funding it." I didn't wait for his response. I pressed the end call button. Immediately, I went into my phone settings and blocked Greg's number. I left Sarah's unblocked, but I muted her notifications. The silence that filled my living room was the sweetest sound I had heard in over a year. There was no screaming match. There was no dragging out a legal battle over an eviction. I had simply used my absolute right of ownership to permanently erase the problem. I stood up, picked up my watering can, and went out to the garden. My roses needed tending, and I had a flight to catch in the morning. It has been 6 months since I sold the lake house. I spent a glorious month in Italy eating pasta, touring museums, and sleeping in without worrying about anyone else's schedule. When I returned, I used a portion of the house funds to upgrade my own kitchen and put the rest into a secure, high-yield trust. Sarah didn't speak to me for 3 months. I didn't chase her. A mother's love is unconditional, but my presence in her life requires basic respect. Eventually, she showed up at my front door on a Tuesday afternoon. She looked tired. Greg had apparently thrown a massive tantrum over losing his free vacation spot, and the tension in their marriage had finally boiled over. She sat at my kitchen island, stirring a cup of coffee. "Greg still won't talk about it," she mumbled, keeping her eyes on her mug. He had to spend $10,000 renting a massive cabin at the last minute for his family that weekend. That sounds like a financial lesson he needed to learn. I replied, wiping down the counter. "I'm sorry, Mom." She finally looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "I let him push you out. I thought if I just kept the peace with him, it would be fine. I forgot it was your dream." I stopped wiping the counter and looked at my daughter. "I accept your apology, Sarah," I said softly but firmly. "But you need to understand something. I am your mother, not your safety net. My life is mine. I will not be pushed into the corner of any room I built." She nodded slowly, finally understanding the immovable boundary I had drawn. "We are slowly rebuilding our relationship, but it is different now. We meet for lunch in public. She doesn't ask me for money, and Greg does not come around. I don't regret building the lake house. It served its purpose for a time. But more importantly, I don't regret selling it. Sometimes the only way to teach someone your value is to completely remove your presence from their life." I picked up my tea, walked out to my back patio, and smiled at the sun. My life was completely, undeniably mine.